You can start.
Okay, welcome everyone. I am Sciortino of SEAJunction, and again, I am here for the seventh episode of the drama of what is happening in Myanmar. Up to this day, still conflict and no feasible solution. Uh, and this include the sham election, of which we will hear a lot today by our resource person, Debbie Stothard, who, as you all know, she is the founder and leader of ALTSEA, an organization working on ASEAN and Myanmar for many decades. This episode, as usual, is a collaboration of SEAJunction with two main media, Myanmar Media in Exile, Mizzima and The Irrawaddy. Okay, Debbie, you can start.
Hi, Leah, and hi, everybody. I know it feels like for some of you, it's a new year, and for me, it just seems to be a continuation of 2025. I hope you all had a good end of year break. For our hardworking team at ALTSEA, we did not have a break over Christmas or the New Year because we were busy monitoring and evaluating the junta's sham election. In fact, our team put out election digest every few days, and we put out phase one. So phase one of the election was centered around voting on December the 28th. Phase two was voting on January the 11th in different set of townships, and phase three is coming up on the 25th of January, which is this Sunday. So our team has been working hard, putting out the digest and putting out overviews. And after this session, I'm going to finalize the overview for phase two of the sham election. So it's all about the sham elections. Anyway, I think there has been some despair at the end of last year about the sham elections because the some people were saying, "Oh, this is how the military junta, will prolong its rule over the country and seek legitimacy." Well, yes, the junta was very desperate to hold these sham elections because they were lacking in both de jure, that means legal standing, legitimacy in the country, because they launched an illegal coup that broke their own military drafted constitution. And also, the junta lacked de facto legitimacy. They didn't actually have control of the country. In fact, most people like Kin Omar would argue that we are seeing a failed coup in Burma, Myanmar, because the majority of the country's territory is under resistance control, and the junta actually has stable control of only about 25% of the country. So the junta, lacking both de facto and de jure legitimacy, needs the sham election to establish some type of legitimacy and credibility. And of course, our number one toxic masculine example of toxic masculinity in Burma, Min Aung Hlaing, Senior General, also needs to prove he's using this election to try and prove that he was right in launching the failed coup. And the military junta needs to justify its atrocity crimes and continued control of politics and economics in the country. But, this fake election and the fake victory, I'm not going to talk about who won how many seats, because even from the previous updates, we were warning people, the parties that won over 90% of the seats in the last general election in 2020, the NLD and other ethnic political parties, have been dissolved. They're out of the picture. So the military junta's aligned party, the USDP, the Union Solidarity Development Party, has grabbed most of the seats. Some of the emerging parties that hoped that they could grab some seats in the vacuum left behind by, with the vacuum created by the absence of NLD, themselves have not won any seats. In fact, they got into trouble. So this fake election and the fake victory is undermined by violence, coercion, exclusion, resistance, and fraud and incompetence. There is so much information. I'm not going to go into all of it, but hopefully this gives you a taste. So I'm also sharing on the right side of the screen these posters of our different digests that we were posting every couple of days. So when we talk about violence, it is overwhelming, to be honest. Now, during the period of December 21 to 16th of January, the junta unleashed 797 armed clashes and attacks against civilians that killed 159 men, women, and children. 157 townships were affected. Now, if you want to know about 157 townships, that's roughly half the 330 townships in the country. And out of that 797 armed clashes and attacks, 179 were airstrikes. Just on December 28 alone, that's the voting day for phase 1. There were 53 armed clashes and attacks on civilians. 4 civilians were killed, and that included 6 airstrikes, and 40 townships were affected. Now, in phase 2 voting on the 11th of January, there were 56 armed clashes and attacks. 7 civilians were killed. So in almost the same time, on the same day, in that one day, 7 civilians were killed. There were 14 airstrikes and 36 townships were affected. So we could see from the first voting day to the second voting day, we had more civilians killed, and we had more than double the number of airstrikes on just one day. But if we looked overall, the period, the week before phase 1 voting and the week after, we saw 408 clashes, 77 airstrikes, 84 civilian fatalities. And in phase 2, slightly less, 489 armed clashes and attacks, but more airstrikes and slightly less civilian fatalities. So we could see over this 4-week period, there's been that amount of clashes that I explained. So earlier today, someone was reflecting that, before you have an election that's supposed to try and resolve some of the conflicts and try to resolve some of the crises, people are supposed to sit down, have some agreements, and have some nominally inclusive process, and definitely have less fighting. But it looks like we haven't seen that much of a change in the violent behavior of this military junta. There's been just too many cases of coercion and intimidation. But today, the media reported the junta announced that it took action against a total of 404 people, 324 men and 80 women, but also including children, because I think I shared with you last year that there were teenagers who were arrested and detained under this illegal junta's so-called election protection law. Now, friends on the ground were complaining. They said that there was so much intimidation and coercion to try and force people to vote. So in some areas, locals were asked to give their voter registration number in order to pass through military and police checkpoints. Now, these checkpoints are not just in in rural areas or conflict areas, even in places like Rangoon. I guess the closest I could imagine is there's probably as many police checkpoints in Rangoon as there are 7-Elevens in Bangkok. That should give you an idea. So people have to continually they are continually harassed and checked. And now they're being asked, what's your voter registration number? Households, including households in places like Rangoon, were phoned or visited by local officials. People were told, we have all your household lists. We know who's staying there. And and people were given pressure that if they voted, if the whole household voted, then maybe they could escape forced conscription. People were being told, traders on the border were being told, you can't cross the border for business if you don't vote. And many young people who were planning to study overseas or go overseas were told, you definitely have to vote or else they won't let you leave the country. So some rural people were warned, people who were working in Rangoon and towns, rural people were told, you have to go home and you have to vote. If you don't vote, the local authorities could accuse you of violating the election protection law, of opposing the election, and you could go to jail for 3 years. So people were feeling so intimidated and afraid that some of them felt very compelled to go back to their home village or hometown to vote. And amongst the people, the emerging parties that considered themselves pro-democracy, the People's Pioneer Party, headed by Tet Tet Kai, had complained about fraudulent behavior that benefited the USDP, the Military Aligned Party. And she was arrested, and then they said, no, she was not arrested, she's just questioned, because there's a lot of nervousness. If you are head of the party and you are actually arrested or sent to jail, your party could be dissolved or you have to be kicked out of your party. Similarly, People's Party candidate Ulu Min was jailed for a year because during his campaign speeches, he used the words revolution and uprising. So that was a threat to the election. So therefore, he went to jail for a year. That's just tip of the iceberg. When we talk about exclusion, now this is quite interesting because this is where being a geek helps. Earlier in this whole picture, the junta announced that 65 townships will not be allowed to join the sham election. Now, what my colleagues did was they went and checked what was the population in those townships. Now, and then we did the estimates of the voting population age 18 and above, and took into account estimated annual population growth rate of 0.65%, and we were shocked. And after we deducted the average number of displaced people, we were shocked to realize that in these 65 townships, it's about 7.5 million people of voting age that were automatically excluded from the sham election. And now, today, the Union Election Commission of the Military Junta canceled voting in Mansi and Momau. These are 2 townships in Kachin State. So now 67 townships are out. And when we look at the townships that are supposed to be participating in the elections, we were shocked to find that up to 30%, up to a third of the village tracts and wards, that means the little neighborhoods that form a big township, are already excluded from voting. So when we say this township is participating, more likely it's about 60 or 70% of the township actually that is participating. And of course, this ironically named Diversity and Peace Party declared basically genocide of the Rohingya was part of the official party policy. And this is how we also saw that this junta's sham election is emboldening hate speech and normalizing atrocity crimes. It is quite shocking, but it is also important to understand too that the junta itself was trying to hint or to induce Muslims, especially Rohingya, to vote for them, and saying, oh, if you participate in the election, we will give you back your citizenship. Now, it's important to understand that the junta has been quite desperate because the UEC, the Union Election Commission of the military junta, has been saying that they have 50% voter turnout. But it's pretty clear that in most places, people have refused to vote. Only people facing quite a lot of intimidation or fearing travel sanctions or forced conscription have voted. And there is concern that the intimidation and the coercion will spike because this Sunday, this weekend, phase three voting is the last chance for the junta to try and force as many people as possible to vote. A friend who voted in the 2020 election said she was trying to avoid voting, but there was so much intimidation and threat that she finally went to the voting station, the polling station. And she said it was a very stark contrast. The same polling station in this sham election was empty compared to the crowded numbers of people at the same polling station in 2020 who were keen to elect the NLD and other political parties in that election. So we've seen quite a bit of stark contrast, and people also really worried that the pressure is going to increase on people who avoided voting. So when we talk about incompetence and fraud, I think you will have to look at the bottom right of the screen. We've been religiously going to the uec.gov.mm website, the military junta's Union Election Commission website, since December. And the website is down. But if you look for specific pages, you will see that the UEC's pages for the 2020 election are still up, but not the main landing page, not any local information. The UEC has given up using its website and is just talking to junta control media. And we don't know whether it's a kind of a form of censorship or whether they just gave up. Now, there have been widespread technical failures of these voting machines. So this election is a little different from 2020 because they brought these voting machines in, and they've been what they've been doing is making all kinds of fuck ups. I mean, this is crazy. It wasn't just older voters saying we don't know how to use these machines. Like, how do we use these machines? It was also the election commission officials themselves fucking up, and they even forgot their basic local geography. They misclassified townships in Karenni state as part of Karen state. The people were complaining that the machines didn't print the confirmation slips after they voted. And the People's Party and People's Pioneer Party complained. They said that these voting machines would randomly vote for the USDP, the military junta's USDP party. So when people just press a button, and it wasn't dedicated to a specific party, the unallocated buttons would automatically give the vote to the USDP. And then in Rangoon region, there was pre-filled votes. People are so efficient. This military junta is so committed to democracy, and so efficient about it that officials had pre-filled the ballot papers, and they said that they had pre-filled advance ballots for so-called guest list residents. Now, guest list residents basically are people who happen to be staying in that neighborhood or in that location temporarily, because they're supposed to register wherever they go, wherever you spend the night. And so it seems that the guest residents who had, who had their advance ballots pre-filled, who did not vote, felt that their actual votes were counted when they didn't actually vote. So that's a lot of fraud. But then, let's talk about money. The junta had been going around saying, after the election, we're going to go back to business as usual. We are going to be able to revive the economy. But let's not forget the economic chaos in Burma is mainly because of the military. They've been pushing all their revenues towards the war effort. The military has killed off its manufacturing base in the country. The industries in the country are in the doldrums, but military factories that produce weapons, that produce armored cars, that produce bombs and missiles are doing fine. In fact, the military is actually producing missiles for Russia to use in Ukraine. Now, we were looking at the money, and we have followed the money, and we were trying to check whether the Myanmar chart, the MMK, is going to strengthen. Because if the junta is hyping that, it's going to be back to business as usual, things are going to get normal, everything's going to be fine after the election, then we would expect the Myanmar chart to strengthen. But what we've seen is that overall, the Myanmar chart has weakened slightly. From 25th of December to 20th of January, the Myanmar chart weakened from 3,985 chart to 4,055 against the US dollar, and it weakened by one chart from 128 Myanmar chart to 129 Myanmar chart to the baht. And so, we were expecting to see like quite a significant rise, but we haven't actually seen that. And I think the fact that the junta is planning another forced conscription drive after the sham election will also have economic implications. If you remember, in February 2024, the junta started implementing this forced conscription law that had been, on ice for a couple of years, and they reactivated it and started forcibly conscripting at first males between the age of 18 and 35, but now women are also being forcibly conscripted. Now, the problem with this is that a lot of workers fled the country or went into hiding. So businesses were hit by the forced conscription drive because their young workers started to disappear. Some were actually forcibly conscripted and others fled the country or went into hiding. So if you're going to have another big forced conscription drive, this is going to not just inflame conflict in the country, but also further depress the economy. And when we talk about currency, we have to talk about gold. Now, if you look at this graph, in December 2025 and so far in January 2026, there's been a sharp spike in the price of gold. So most economists will tell you if the If the national currency is weak and then there's a gold rush, people rushing to buy more gold, it's a very scary sign of economic insecurity. So today, gold prices reached an all-time high of Myanmar chart 10,200,000 chart per tikal. A tikal is about 16 grams or half an ounce. And that's a very big spike. So if ASEAN was hoping, they've been warning the junta needs to reduce conflict in before it can have an election. It needs to have an inclusive election. Basically, everything that ASEAN and neighboring countries were in the international community were calling for, the junta very, very conscientiously did the opposite. So what can we expect from an economic outlook? Well, we're going to have more forced conscription, it means less workers. We're already seeing more taxes being imposed on Burmese people overseas, as well as Burmese people locally. We're going to expect more asset seizures, more land and resource grabbing. The junta has already restarted gold mining in some of the very sensitive areas. As soon as there was voting, then they restarted gold mining in those areas. They're really hungry for resources and revenue. And we're going to see more forced closures of currency exchanges. People are really complaining about this, that money changes are really getting into trouble. The junta is trying to stop, dramatically stop this bleeding of capital, this capital flight from the country. And we're going to see more money grabbing arbitrary regulations. A couple of days ago, firstly, the junta actually insisted that it control all and supervise and regulate all aspects of migrant workers on a junta to government arrangement, because they wanted to control who got jobs overseas, and they wanted to have the lion's share of taxes and of payments of corruption. Now, a whole bunch of migrant workers were getting ready to fly off to East Asia, South Korea, and Japan, I think, earlier this week, and to start the year. And they were all at Mingladan Airport, and they were told, you can't leave. Can you imagine all that money for flights, getting packed, doing all the paperwork, paying all the different fees and taxes, and then as you're about to leave, being told, oh no, there's a new policy now. You have to go from Rangoon to the capital, Naypyidaw. You have to go all there, queue up, and ask for an extra permission to leave the country. So this is obviously another attempt to try and squeeze more money from migrants. And given the depressed economy, that the price of rice has increased by about 400% since the coup began in February 2021. People are desperate to get jobs overseas, because that's the only way their families are going to survive. So we can already see this is bad news all around. And those people who are betting on the military junta somehow solving the problem after using the sham election as a solution or as a way out are sadly mistaken. I would like to sell them some lottery tickets and some infrastructure, because there was no way this junta was going to deliver solutions. It only causes problems. So people were asking me, is this sham election free and fair? Well, for me, asking whether this sham election is free and fair is like asking whether the sun causes COVID-19. Obviously, both questions seem equally ridiculous and irrelevant. The question that we should be asking is why ASEAN has not yet supported an embargo on weapons and military equipment. If we are really concerned about regional stability, we cannot afford to allow this junta the means to continue committing atrocity crimes. So that's it from me for now. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive overview of what has been happening with the sham election. And like you make clear, that is not going to be a solution to the current problem. Now we are going to see if there are any questions. One was already here quite from the beginning. Please provide your perspective on how China is carving up Myanmar.
Yeah, one of the weird things that happened was during phase one of the sham election, China very happily declared because they were very happy with the election, this envoy, and even boasted that the election was the result of an agreement between Xi Jinping and Min Aung Hlaing. And I think that much is probably true. The China they hoped that they can justify business as usual and convince other countries to resume diplomatic and economic engagement with Burma, Myanmar under military rule if this election was held, to give Min Aung Hlaing a fig leaf of legitimacy. But I think the way it's been conducted, the amount of violence, the coercion, the obvious fraud and incompetence, it's not just shocking and angering. It's also kind of embarrassing with what's been going on. It's just too obvious. I think China is going to face some difficulties. China was hoping that the economy in Burma will improve, they'll recover, and then Burma will start to be a more profitable partner. But I think China's resource grabs, the fact that Wanbao Company has been implicated in supporting the Pew Sortie, this very violent militia that has massacred people and mutilated people, is already bad, because Wanbao is actually connected to state-owned enterprise. So what we have to consider is we do need to expose this, and we do need to also remind China that its divide and rule strategies, trying to force the MNDAA forcing MNDAA to give up Lashio City, to return Lashio City to the military junta, forcing the TNLA, Tar National Liberation Army, to give up Mogok, the ruby mining town, trying to use its might to support the junta, is going to become a much more costly venture. And what was very interesting is that we were trying to look at whether any of the political parties offered, some decent economic development policies. And my colleagues who was shocked to realize that no political party actually mentioned the scam centers. And the scam centers continue to be a source of concern for China. So no political group, no political party, including the military junta aligned party, USDP, were allowed to participate in these elections, have mentioned the scam centers. And I think we already know why, because various cronies and actors in the junta itself directly benefit and profit from these scam centers. So, China will continue to try and carve up not just Burma, Myanmar, but any country in the region or elsewhere that it can get its hands on in order to ensure resource security, in order to ensure continued and cheap access to raw materials that it needs for its industries, such as rare earths that are used in smartphone and computer technology. They will continue to they will continue not to grab land, but to lease land and to do very harmful, intensive agriculture to produce food for their own people. They will continue to do that. But I think they will find that engaging in Burma, Myanmar is going to be more and more costly if the longer this junta stays in charge.
Okay, we have a few other questions. One regards the current court case, international court about the Rohingya. What is your view on that? Another question refers to Trump. Do you think that the USA invasion of Venezuela and kidnapping of his president, as well as the threats to Cuba, Mexico, and Colombia, sort of give China permission to do the same with Myanmar and the region under an implicit sphere of influence strategy of the Trump administration? That is another question. And the last question is, now 5 years are passed already. We know it's coming up 1st of February. What is your vision of the 6th year under the coup? Unfortunately, we have arrived to 6 years. So please, your answer to these 3 questions.
Okay. Now, there was a lot of media asking about the ICJ case, where the Gambia is suing Myanmar for breaching the Genocide Convention. And actually, many of the arguments that Gambia framed in that case were eventually adopted by South Africa to sue Israel over violation of Genocide Convention. And, this case was lodged at the ICJ in November 2019. So it's been 6 long years before we finally heard the voices of the victims of this Rohingya genocide. And but we mustn't also forget that within weeks of the case being lodged by the Gambia at the International Court of Justice, which is considered the UN court, the International Court of Justice issued provisional measures, basically to tell Myanmar not to destroy evidence, and also to take measures to prevent continuation of the violence and persecution of the Rohingya in the country. So, by issuing those provisional measures, then we could see that actually the ICJ was kind of acknowledging that, yes, the Rohingya were facing persecution. So finally, the Rohingya, finally feeling like they are finally being acknowledged. The genocide that their voices are being heard. And there were very many impassioned descriptions by the Gambia side, by their representatives, about what happened on the ground. And it was very, very dramatic. But, we also have to remember 2 things. The election, the airstrikes, the mass atrocity crimes that are happening in the country to other people who are not Rohingya, but who are also from Burma. And the genocide of Rohingya stemmed from the problem of military impunity. So we do need to understand that what's happening in the ICJ is also linked to what's happening in Myanmar. And we also need to understand that all these countries who are finally having to acknowledge, whether they like it or not, that there's quite strong grounds to understand, to accept that there's a genocide going on in the country, going on against the Rohingya, also have a moral obligation. There are Rohingya in Thailand, in Bangladesh, in India, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and so many other parts of the world. And many of them are being criminalized because they were stripped of their citizenship, they don't have travel documents. Um, um, and um, and these countries should actually be extending. If we really want to acknowledge that there's a genocide happening, then we have to also fulfill our responsibility to protect. We don't have to fly to Burma. We don't have to send troops to Burma. We just have to extend the protection to Rohingya seeking shelter and safety in our own jurisdictions. And this is something that we need to call out. Many governments are being sympathetic about this genocide case, but they have not actually extended protection to survivors of genocide in their own territory, as they should be. Then the other thing that, oh yeah, when they sent when they essentially violated international law and uh, invaded Venezuela and kidnapped the president and the first lady, whom we all don't like. We don't like. We know what's going on in Venezuela, but this is like a little. This is quite outrageous. Um, it does cause concern. I mean, when Russia invaded Ukraine, I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2013, but then they stepped up the invasion in 2022 and did a full-scale invasion. There was a lot of concern that this might uh, inspire or give a nod to China to invade Taiwan, that that country called Taiwan. And now with Trump essentially endorsing this kind of cowboy tactics, of course, people should be concerned whether that's going to give China some kind of ideas. It's going to this breakdown in international commitment to international law, basic diplomacy, basic IHL is quite horrifying and quite shocking. And of course, everyone, a lot of people talk about 2025 as a hell year. It has been a hell year for many people all around the world. I think 2026 is also going to test our resolve. I think we have to be quite persistent and determined in what's going to unfold this year. People are going to use the sham election as an opportunity to wait and see about whether things improve on the ground. And what we're going to see is probably more resource-based conflicts in Burma, Myanmar, more crackdowns, the military trying to use its puppet parliament to justify all more atrocities and more crackdowns. The resistance, the armed resistance is getting a little bit tired, and so they're going to be they might even be more violent back to the military junta. But we're also seeing groups on the ground not just resisting the junta, but actually developing governance, local governance, and local political models for the future. And we've seen that in the Inclusive Federal Economic Policy Project. We've seen that in the different federal units being developed, that it's more a bottom-up rather than a top-down process. And so we do see that resistance still continuing. There may be some pressure for the military to sort of get rid of Min Aung Hlaing, or for them all to develop suddenly amnesia and say, okay, let's forget about the past few years, let's forget about the past few years and let's turn a new page and just politely ignore what we did. But I think the violence has been so intense. This morning, Kenoma and I were agreeing, like in all our decades of working on Burma, we've not seen this much brutality and intensity of violence. And I think Burmese people, the Burmese and the ethnic population, the Burmans, the other ethnic groups, who have been relatively forgiving in the past are not likely to forgive or accept compromise at this point. They do need accountability. And I think that takes us back to the ICJ case. While the ICJ cannot jail the military junta, it is, after all, UN court, so um, it does. It can make a finding, it can make recommendations, but it really depends on other UN members to implement any kind of measures, any kind of recommendations that the court make. I think there is an increasing appetite for accountability in the country. And I think that's going to be very important, not just for the Rohingya genocide, but for other atrocity crimes in the country. So 2026 is going to be very much a do or die situation. The junta will be under pressure to do some kind of compromise. But I think Min Aung Hlaing has purged the junta. He's purged his junta to get rid of moderates and to fill it with hardliners. And then the possibility of negotiation and the possibility of compromise is less likely. And so we are going to see things get tougher. And I think essentially it's going to be about who lasts longest. But you never know. The end of 2026 may be much, much brighter than the end of 2025.
Well, let's hope
Oh,
indeed
for that.
for Myanmar and for the world. But
Absolutely.
okay, but let's the last question, which need to be answered very, very quick because we are already at the end of our one question referred to Thailand actually, and a current, I mean, recent fight between migrants with, well, various in Mysore, in Thailand, in Bangkok, with the taxi driver in Mysore was with a monk, with Thai ultranationalist. It's not clear exactly what is happening. What you make of that? The question is also whether it's related to the junta trying to create problem in Thailand, so that Thailand would not accept these people, or is more related to Thai politics. The second question is about the prevalence of scam center in Myanmar. What you think now? The Irrawaddy yesterday had the story about small mobile scam operation in, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Esipao Township using Starlink. Is this far-fetched, or you think is possible that is happening, that there are now mobile units in different parts of Myanmar? So one about the increased violence and one about, and then the last one, which is to say how to relate to the fear that the international community is not taking note of how many people have been killed and how many people are refugees now because of the conflict, internally displaced as well as abroad. And that is large, like the Rohingya, different nature, but the victims are quite large. Yet there seems to be not enough attention for that, and whether what can be done by activists, etc., to ensure that the international community is aware that the number of victims is very large indeed. And the last but not least, again, related to Trump, I mean, some people, some Burmese were happy that I mean, they say this should happen for Myanmar, right? That they should also Trump should come to Myanmar and pick up the leaders and bring it, I don't know where. I mean, forgetting that this is an abuse of power. I mean, what do you think of that? I mean, a sense of desperation, I think, but still.
It is a sense of desperation. I think I remember when Iraq was invaded, And Saddam Hussein was targeted by President Bush, and in many people were saying, "Oh, he's going after the diamond, so he should go after the gold next," because Hussein Sain means diamond in Burmese, and the dictator of the day at in Burma was Senior General Tan Shui, and Shui means gold. So they said, well, the US went after the diamond, so now they should get the gold. And of course, people will fantasize that Trump will do the same to Burma. Number one, I don't think he even knows where Burma is. And number two, he has his State Department, his cabinet, his ministers. They've actually said that they're sending back all the Burmese asylum seekers because everything is fine in Burma now. It's having an election. So it looks like Trump would probably be more supportive of the junta and less likely to to launch a Caracas operation. But maybe he doesn't yet know there's uranium, there's natural gas, there's gold, there's rubies. Uh, in Burma. Maybe if he rises up to that, then who knows what he might try to do. But I think um, the issue is this: people of Burma have the solution. Many of them are coming up with the policy frameworks, they're coming up with the political frameworks. They are actually building solutions. The problem is that the international community is allowing the junta to keep on committing this violence, that the international community is not halting the flow of weapons, of technology, and revenue that the junta is using to attack civilians. I think this is the issue. And I think we do need to keep pushing on that. And I think I'm hoping that ASEAN is going to wake up to the fact that they need to take some punitive actions on the military junta of Burma. They cannot maintain the status quo. ASEAN cannot afford this. And so I think everybody has a role, not just us activists, who unfortunately is pretty clear that I'm not going to be able to retire in 2026. Or maybe even I won't be able to take a holiday. But everybody has a role. No matter what you're doing, there's always something you can do for Burma, even if it's to talk to your colleagues, your family members, your friends, to share on social media. I think this is really, really important. And get that algorithm to pay more attention to Burma. And I already talked about the scam centers. None of the political parties mentioned scam center. They know very well the junta is making money. The military has a vested interest in these scam centers. They will have some dramatic actions like launching an airstrike to satisfy on a alleged scam center to satisfy Beijing, but they will continue to allow these scam centers to mutate and to spread and to survive because they make money out of that. And this is where we're going to see 2026, the junta really trying to squeeze as much money as possible from everyone. And that means probably a rise in transnational crime. So we already saw whenever they had these sort of crackdowns on scam centers, you just go onto Google Map and then you will see, oh, a new place is opening up. The electricity, just go and see which lights are on at night in the border area, and you'll be able to see, oh, that's where the new scam center is. So I think we do need to keep our eyes open, because this junta is not just a threat to the security and safety of people in civilians in Burma. They are a threat to the rest of us. And they will continue to be a threat to us unless we are willing to take actions and sanctions against them. Now, a lot of the anti-Cambodian nationalism is now that there's the Cambodian migrant workers have left, of course, it's going to be now that people have, some nationalists have flexed their muscles, they will be looking for new targets. But it has been a source of concern, not just in Mae Sot and other parts of Thailand, but also in Malaysia and other places, that there has been the military junta and their allies have been trying to infiltrate the migrant and refugee community to uh, to um, to get money from the community to reduce resistance. But also, it's pretty clear, we've already seen in Malaysia even the military junta's embassy vowing to cooperate in migrant worker crackdowns against Myanmar refugees and asylum seekers in the country. So there's a lot of that. And we already saw in Ranong Immigration Detention Center close cooperation between some parts of the Thai authorities and the military junta, especially in selecting detainees who will be forcibly conscripted into the military junta. So I think we do need to keep an eye out, and it's unfortunate that times like this, when resources are so low and compassion is so low, we really need to focus on social cohesion.
Okay, wise words. It's good for ending this episode of updates. We continue to try our best to keep attention for Myanmar. So I want to announce that on the 27th of January, we will open an exhibition on the 5 year of the coup entitled The Coup Years, in which Debbie will be also one of the speakers, together with a representative of UNOHCR, as well as Ayop Mio, the journalist from Myanmar. So they will discuss the 5 year that have passed, the chronicle of what has happened, as well as looking forwards, what needs to be paid attention to, what needs to be done, what all of us, like was said, can still do. On the 28th, we also have another event on the economic situation in Myanmar. I think Debbie should come to contribute to that, because I am not sure the researcher have such a depth knowledge. So I think there is space for contributing to the situation, to understand more about the economic situation in Myanmar. So we thank once more our partner, the Mizzima, as well as The Irrawaddy, for broadcasting our episodes not only on our website. This allows us to spread the reach, since Mizzima and The Irrawaddy are, of course, they have a much larger public. So thanks again to these two media that help us to reach greater public. And thanks to all the ones that follow us on Zoom as well as on Facebook. Thank you again, and see you next month. Bye-bye.
See you on the 27th. Come
Oh,
to
yes,
SEAJunction. Don't just join
First,
us online.
yeah. First, come to the 27 for all those that are in Bangkok or neighborhood. It is a beautiful exhibition of 4 photographers from Myanmar, and young photographer, very courageous. 3 of them have ended up in jail because of their photography, actually, for taking photography while protesting. The umbrella demonstration and other demonstration were documented by them and spread on social media, and for that they had to pay dearly. So photography has been a tool of advocacy, but of course has also been, photographers have been targeted exactly because photography has been a tool of advocacy when demonstration could no longer be made. So these four photographers have been put together a very overview, not so much of the violence, but also of the resistance of all that has been done in these 5 years to resist the oppression of the military. So do not miss it. Come on the 27th at the BACC, Bangkok Arts and Cultural Center on the 5th floor this time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
Bye.
you.